Hey folks, let's talk about why is Elon just so bloody effective, just so bloody impactful, right? The game I've chosen to play in life, the most important game I've chosen to play in life, is to build companies. And in that game, there is no one who's done it like Elon. Like across, look across the board, there's no competition, right? The scale at which he operates, recently terafab, 100 terawatts, the sheer ambition, right? And yeah, mind-boggling, right? SpaceX and the recent filing of SpaceX and the details that have come out, right? It's just so mind-boggling, and that's the stuff that inspires me a lot. I've got lots of issues with a lot of stuff that he says and who what he represents and all of that, but I can compartmentalize. Like this guy is the greatest ever to have done it. There's not even any competition, and in the most consequential game of all, which is advancing human civilization technologically, because you do that and then the rest of it takes care of itself. So I consider him to be the most impactful human alive right now, and probably will be for a long time, right? One of the most impactful. And so for me, despite my distaste of what a lot of his operating philosophy is in life, um, sheer lack of compassion at the top of that list, I can look at the guy and I can notice that, okay, this guy's got some special talents. Right, why exactly is this so bloody effective? And what can I draw from that? So, yeah, I recently listened to this podcast where this guy who's written a book about him was talking about, let me find that. So if I want to get better at the game that I've chosen to play, the most important game for me, the most important game I'll probably play, uh, no, not probably, the most important game I'll play, period. I'm going to learn from the best. And Elon, so this podcast episode I was talking about, it's how Elon achieves the impossible. Eric Johansson on the Chris Williamson pod, and they are discussing the book, this recent book that he's written, the Book of Elon, which is a very atypical book because that book does not really have any of the author's thoughts. He's just compiled a lot of different things that Elon's written, tweeted, or said in this one book that gives you a glimpse into why this guy is just so bloody effective, right? Yeah, so they talk a lot about those principles, and I want to talk about some of those, right? One of the things that I took from that interview, and the things I've just taken from interacting with a lot of stuff that I also read a couple of Elon books, end to end. So I've got a decent glimpse of how he operates. I want to just talk about some of those principles. So the top principle is the sheer urgency. This guy does not wait around. He does not. He's like, okay, you know what? If this is the solution, why are we waiting? Let's just go for it. Go full barrel. So the gap between the gap between decision and action is minimal for him. And that is probably the cornerstone of his efficacy. And then the scale, so there is the actual action part, but at the highest level, it's like, what does he want to do, right? Like, why is he doing all the things that he's doing, right? If you want to maximize wealth, there were other ways to do it. Building a rocket company in the shorter term was not the best way to do it, right? And there were, so he's got these high ideals. He's got this sci-fi vision for humanity that he sees in his mind about what humanity could, us in the stars, living in the stars, spreading into the cosmos. And the way he's framed is obviously, having a backup plan. But in his own mind, he's read a lot of science fiction. I'm a big sci-fi nerd, so I can understand where those particular impulses of wanting to spread humanity come from. That is such a huge part of the way I think about what the work I want to do. Right, so that is a huge part of his operating philosophy of just how good life could be for us. Right, don't get so stuck on where we are right now as a species, all of these problems, these political gridlocks, and the absolute nonsense in our current moment. Just ignore all of that and take a first principles approach. Like, we are humans, we've got this potential, we've got this space around us, we've got potential insane abundance of resources, right? Like the sun, for example, it gives off billions of times more energy than we consume in a given year, every second. If you want resources, minerals, again, we've got asteroids. We've got no constraints on resources, right? So why are we not thinking big? That scale and that driver of just how good life could be for our species, that like, yeah, I love that scale, that way of thinking. I deeply resonate with that. So that's a huge part of us. Everything flows down from that, but that's not enough because a lot of people have those kinds of high ideals, those grand visions. I would count myself in that particular group where I haven't been super effective, or I haven't been effective at all. Let's call spade spade. But I always look at my writing from the past. I look at when I think about my past self. Like I always had those grand ideals and those grand visions for humanity, about where we could be as a species. That is not enough. That is not a sufficient condition. The reason Elon's just so bloody effective is that he's able to, well, psychologically he's just wired very differently from you and I, right? I can't even imagine being in his headspace. But he's got a very unique mindset. This urgency comes from that. He does not care about excuses. All he cares about is, okay, I'll be getting the results. And he's also a bag of contradictions, right? Like he's a very complex creature, just like we all are. So he does not care about these. He's very mission minded, but he also still, on some level, seeks validation. But the way he seeks validation is he's seeking validation from a long term perspective, and from what I gather, which is the kind of mindset that Brian Johnson also has. One of the things I love about his philosophy is he talks a lot about, I don't want to gain the respect of my peers. If you just look at history, we were wrong about so many things. We were wrong about most things that we believed in at a given time. It's only centuries later that we realize the truth of that particular thing. So I want to gain the respect of people living in the 25th century who realize the follies of our current ways of thinking and who got a completely different philosophy of life. And those are the people I want to gain the respect of. So there's a lot of beauty in living that way, right? And a lot of depth, and you need a lot of courage to live that way, because you're kind of, again, I'm not saying that these people have perfected those philosophies, because if you actually did imbibe that philosophy entirely, you wouldn't care at all about what your current cohort of people think. But you can't really operate that way, because you do need to convince investors, you do need to convince the public, etc. For example, Brian Johnson, he needs a lot of people to kind of buy into his whole persona, buy into his blueprint, etc. So there's obviously a lot of nuance in all of these things, but the bottom line is Elon. Getting back to Elon Musk, the urgency with which he operates. I was reading an anecdote recently about someone talking about how he would want to hire this person, and he interviewed him. He's like, okay, this guy's the guy for this job. Interviewed him, and he's offered the job right away. I mean, if you're the CEO and if you like someone, obviously you can do that. But he made the move, right? So this guy had a couple of complications. He just removed those literally on this was Saturday 6:30, and removed those obstacles for this person. I was like, okay, you can join this, right? No need to wait around or waste around. So that's the way this guy operates, right? Just absolute urgency. Like, okay, if you need to do this, let's just do this. Another thing that I absolutely love, so urgency, that's pillar one. Then the bottleneck method, which is a really powerful way to go about solving problems if you're building something, is that these n number of things that you could be doing at a given time. As someone who's doing everything for my company, I could be doing content, I could be doing marketing, I could be doing sales, I could be doing product, I could be doing engineering, right? But at any given time, the ROI of a certain activity, the ROI of an activity is determined by the time in which you do that thing, right? So in other words, there's a bottleneck to progress, and big bottlenecks, there's smaller bottlenecks, but there are always bottlenecks to progress. the way he approaches problem solving, and because he's got multiple projects, this is a very important method for him, for anyone who has multiple projects for that matter, is he determines what is the biggest bottleneck for this thing right now. Let's just focus on this. Everything else is a distraction. Does not matter. We can take care of it later. I've got other people who can take care of it. How are my efforts and how is my energy best channeled into removing this bottleneck? That's all that matters, right? So that's the way he operates. So the urgency, number one, bottleneck method, focus on what matters the most right now, not what might matter in the next 3-4 days, but what are the few things that you could be doing today, right? It could, and keep the list to less than 5. What are those things that you could be doing today that will move the needle the most, and do only those things before you do anything else. If you do just that thing, your efficacy and your impact will get amplified substantially, right? So that's number 2. And then you got first principles thinking. A lot of us think about analogies, right? Like we use these examples, we use mental models borrowed by other people. We don't reason from scratch, right? So, for example, rockets. Rockets is the best example in Elon's playbook, because people stopped asking, can rockets be improved? Like they were just using the current paradigm as a possibly the permanent paradigm, that this is something we'll have to work with, can't be improved, right? And we're talking of the biggest agencies with the smartest people, NASA, Roscom, ESA, JAXA, right? So these big agencies with some of the smartest people, they couldn't get past their own, current focus, current paradigm bias. But if they were able to do that, then they would come to the conclusion that Elon, despite not having any background, was able to, because he was not an expert, so he was able to ask the stupid questions, and he was able to start from scratch. He didn't care about this illusion of knowledge, and a lot of people give into this impulse that humans have, right? That you wanna, for example, if you enter a new field, then you wanna fit in, and you wanna seem like someone who is on par with the people in the field, right? So you've got the earned knowledge, but for a lot of people, they don't want to seem stupid, so they want to amplify the optics of their competence, so they might pretend to know more than they do, and part of that includes not questioning certain things, right? But if you are a newcomer, and if you got the humility, and if you know that the best answers come from first principles thinking from the very base, then you will ask questions. You will not be afraid to look a fool, and you won't be afraid because you are a fool. But the only way to go from being a fool to not being a fool is to ask foolish questions, right? And so you ask people a lot of these questions. Okay, why are we just chucking away the 99% of the cost of a rocket, right? Like what can we do better than that? And that led him to obviously reusable rockets, which just revolutionized space industry. So that's another thing. Funny thing about my Twitter feed is that I'll block Elon Musk because his tweets are absolutely outrageous. Well, some of them, and if you become too political, you just become an idiot, right? This is yeah, too much of a political range is makes you dumb, right? This is it has happened with literally every single person. But anyways, I'll muted him, but I get a lot of Elon stuff, and some of that is just absolutely great. Yeah, recently I saw this tweet. Yeah, there's a maniacal sense of urgency as their operating principle, right? You don't see that with any company, and for him, he's made that the clarion call for his companies, and that makes all the difference, because at the end of the day, a lot of the companies are kind of playing the same games, right? Competing for the same end price. For example, if you're Tesla, you're competing against these car companies who want to again sell cars to n number of customers. So you kind of you're competing. Now, who wins? Innovation is a part of it, but even innovation, right? It happens in cycles, and you can speed rocket the innovative process by having the right culture. By you can do a whole lot of things, right? Obviously, talent is like the base level of that pyramid, but you can do whole lot of things on top of it. And there are cultures where innovation happens, but it happens at a leisurely pace. And there are cultures where innovation happens, it happens at light speed. And Elon's built the latter culture because, well, he says that maniacal sense of urgency is our operating principle. And this example is, I think someone who works with them gave this example that Elon hired a machinist, negotiated his salary, and had him start all in one conversation on a Saturday at 6 p.m. Most companies take 2 weeks to do what he does in an hour. Similar, but it's not urgency, I think it's yeah. And then there's another thing that elevates him to the very top. Mark Andreessen highlights why the people who work for Elon echo the same sentiment as those who work for Steve Jobs. Even after difficult interactions or sudden departures, they inevitably report that they did the best work of their entire lives because they were pushed to the absolute limits. What drives this intense environment is a demand for truth seeking at all costs. People who criticize Elon often miss this fundamental trait. He genuinely wants to know the ground truth and has zero tolerance for anything else. When confronting bad news, he's absolutely ruthless and relentless in making sure he understands exactly what's actually going on. This level of radical transparency is shockingly rare in the business world. The typical startup founder operates on forced optimism, constantly putting on a brave face, telling everyone to have faith, and promising that everything will be great just to keep the talent from leaving. Elon completely flips that standard script. He operates with pure urgency by simply telling the unvarnished truth, even when that truth is that the company will go bankrupt and die if they fail. In almost any other corporate environment, that level of blunt existential dread would cause the talent pool to immediately bleed out. But for the teams working under him, that brutal honesty acts as the ultimate catalyst. It strips away the corporate fluff and forces them to rise to the occasion, leaving them with the undeniable realization that, much like the engineers who built the first iPhone, they just completed the greatest work of their careers. I mean, right, this guy, the way he works, right, like he's just very special. The more I read about his, and this is me just yeah, so, like, you gotta learn from the best, right? Like, this guy is so good. Honestly. I don't want to keep hedging my words because you gotta respect the greatness. But this guy, the more I read about him, the more I just look at the scale at which he's operating and the scale at which he's likely to operate in the near future. There's just so much to take from this. Right, the operating principles of urgency, the bottleneck method, first principles thinking, the way he's able to inspire really talented people to do the best work of their life. To push past the impossible, to push past their limitations of what's possible, to operate in timelines that would make people in other environments feel like they're taking on a Sisyphean task. Yeah, just a very special way of operating, and that playbook is something I consciously, right, because I haven't figured out what my playbook is going to be like long term. But in the shortest, well, I mean, I've got a rough idea, but in the shorter to medium term, I think the Elon playbook is super effective. I also love his operating philosophy. A couple of other things that he's talked about when it comes to that is the foundation of his philosophy being that he's curious about the nature of the universe. And obviously I will die, but I would like to know that we are in part of to understanding the nature of the universe and the meaning of life, and what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe. Every human who's ever lived, every breakthrough in consciousness, and every dream for the future is currently contained on this lone blue marble. To ensure the light of consciousness continues, we must become a multiplanetary species. We need to assume that life and consciousness is extremely rare and it might only be us. And if that's the case, then we have to do everything possible to ensure the light of consciousness is not extinguished. And he's also got this really fun process called the algorithm, which he uses. The first step of that is to make the requirements less dumb and starts by questioning the requirements. Doesn't matter how smart the person is, except no requirements from departments. They must have a human name attached to them. Second part is to delete and simplify. Delete everything you possibly can. The most useful heuristic is that you have to over delete. If you aren't adding back at least 10% of what you deleted, then you haven't been deleted enough. The reason to simplify is that you get both reliability and low costs. You want fewer parts and fewer lines of code. Complexity is recursive. Each additional element requires more complexity and more work. Those first two steps carry 80% of the weight. Number three is optimize, which is typical engineering work. The fourth is accelerate, which is just go faster. And the fifth is to automate. The problem is almost everybody does these 5 steps in the reverse order. There are a couple of anecdotes which are very illustrative of the way he works. So this is one post I came across recently. Elon's first wife once described what it's like to watch him fail. She said he doesn't react the way normal people react. When a rocket explodes, most people in the room go silent. Some cry, some start calculating the financial damages. Elon pulls out his phone and starts making calls. These are not emotional calls, these are engineering calls. What failed? What can we fix? When's the next launch? His voice doesn't change. His face doesn't change. The rocket that just cost $60 million is already dead and buried in the past. The next one is all that exists, all that matters. She said it was the most unsettling thing she's ever witnessed. Not because he was cold, but because he genuinely was not affected. The failure did not register as a failure. It registered as data, an experiment that produced results that informed the next experiment. This is why he wins, not because he doesn't fail. He fails more spectacularly than anyone in history. He wins because failure occupies zero psychological space. It enters as data and exists as action. Most people lose not because they fail, but because they spend weeks processing the failure before acting again. Elon spends 0 seconds. The gap between failure and next attempt is a phone call. Right, so this is so bloody unique, right? Like, we don't see this trait, and I was thinking about this particular trait. I was also noticed this in the way I operate to some degree, but I need to ramp it up to the nth level if I want to take LNT and decos where I need to take them. And the term I've settled on is calculated detachment. It's being so focused on the long-term mission that you don't get caught up in your shorter-term failures. And you can tune out from the disappointment. You can tune out from the noise of daily life, because the long-term mission is all that matters. What you want to build and why you're building it is all that matters. And that mission occupies such a large part of your brain space, and creates such a huge pressure for you. Good kind of pressure, good kind of stress, a eustress, that you don't have space to let the useless ruminations and discussions on failure take hold in your brain. You don't have time for that. You don't have space for that. And so this superpower of calculated detachment, being able to toggle your level of attachment in real time. Okay, this is what I want to care about right now, because this is what serves a long-term mission, and I need to tune down my attachment to this thing, maybe even completely remove it because it doesn't serve me. Right, being able to control and toggle your attachment levels. This is a superpower, like one of the most consequential superpowers you could have as someone who's playing this game of building stuff, building companies. And he's got this in spades. He's probably at the top list of that. No distractions, no excuses, no ruminations, nothing of that sort. Just pure mission focus, and being able to doesn't mean that he does not care at all about other things, right? He's able to toggle the his level of attachment to things. I might sound very sociopathic to normal people, and there's something I can see where people's impression of this sounding being sociopathic might come from. But what you need to remember is what Elon's doing at that scale, right? You're going to be wired differently, and we don't really have the terms to describe. He's obviously extremely neurodivergent, right? His brain is just wired so differently from the typical person that you might not even have the words. So again, I'm not saying this is a fanboy or anything of that sort. Like, I'm extremely critical. I recently, yeah, don't like the way XAI is doing AI, lack of alignment, lack of safety culture, the whole emphasis on sex bots with AI, AI waifus and stuff, right? Like, absolutely despicable stuff and directions. And I'm also very concerned about him having so much power in the future. Right? I don't want humanity's fate to be determined by Elon when, he is extremely inconsistent, right? So he says that, okay, everyone's going to have UBI, but he's a rabidly anti-socialist, and he's ultra-capitalist in his outlook. So that's not going to happen. But he needs to say that because he wants to automate all work, he wants to own all labor, right? And he also says things like, okay, we're going to have an abundant age of abundance in the next few years, and yet he goes on to do the not Doge thing, the US aid cuts, which end up leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of kids. So very inconsistent and lack of compassion, and all of those are serious problems. So that's always but what I'm looking at is I'm decoupling that, and I'm compartmentalizing, because that playbook, the way he operates, this is a very special way of operating, right? Like, if you and most people have an idea when people have their favorite sports stars, and they've got their training regimes and stuff. Elon's got his own playbook of being the most effective founder in history, bar none, right? Like, no one even comes close. I don't even like to use the word founder. It's like he's just literally building an empire, the scale of which we cannot fathom. Now, I don't know whether that would be a good thing for humanity. I fear not. But you still gotta, applaud what he's doing, the scale at which he's operating, the scale of the entire project, and the vertical integration, right, across the board. He's got this master plan, connecting all of these different pieces together. Tesla connected to XAI, connected to SpaceX, connected to Neuralink, connected to what else has major projects? Solar City. Right, so he's got this grand unified theory of the Elon verse. So yeah, very special, very, very special. And then his ex-girlfriend, Grimes, once said he lives below the party line by choice. While dating the richest man alive, she watched him live like a broke college student. No house, no possessions, same meals every day, sleeping wherever the factory needed him that week. She said she said she once realized she hadn't seen him eat sitting down in 3 days. She said something that stuck with me. He doesn't experience pleasure from things. Not cars, not houses, not luxury. The only thing that produces visible joy is progress. A rocket landing, a production target hit. His face would change when a test succeeded in a way that it never did change for anything else, including her. This is why SpaceX sends a stealth mascot named Asteroid to space. A normal CEO would think it's unprofessional. Elon does it because even a toy leaving Earth is progress. The mission includes everything, even play. This is why SpaceX, most people work to fund comfort. The comfort becomes a point. The work becomes a cost. Elon eliminated the gap entirely. Every dollar, every hour goes to the mission. Nothing leaks. The thing you think you want is not the thing that makes you extraordinary. The willingness to stop wanting it is. He also does not play these stupid games. A lot of founders, once they've had the success, they move on to very boring problems. Right. In his case, he's gone from small problem to bigger problem to bigger problem to more ambitious stuff. Right. He wants to solve the biggest problem. He wants to create the most value for humanity, which, it's so like common sense to think of that as being the highest ideal of any founder, but that's slowly lacking in Silicon Valley. Now it's actually emerging. Things have been changing for the better over the last few years, but Peter Thiel said it best a few years back, right? We wanted flying cars, and said what we got was 140 character tweets. So yeah, he's literally changed the culture of an entire, not just an entire industry, but the entire world by making people dream bigger. A quick note on the urgency part. So the urgency, there's no real urgency in life, right? When you get down to the bottom of it, right? There's no, you've got this life and you can always rationalize, I can do things later, right? So there's no urgency which is coming from the top. And if you're a CEO, then it's not like, you had to hit any goals or anything of that sort, right? Like you can set your own schedule. He's setting the most ambitious targets for himself, for his companies. This urgency from him, in his case, it comes from this place which is, I need to, something I need to get really good at, much better at, is artificially creating that pressure for yourself. And creating the pressure that I don't have time, I don't have too much time, I've got so much to do. If I don't get on and if I don't operate at my peak every single moment of the day, at the detriment of my long-term, health and well-being, then I'm not doing enough, right? I'm just failing myself. I'm failing my duty to my species, to my people, to my ideals, to my convictions. And so he is able to artificially manufacture this pressure within himself. This is the crucial part, because it's very easy to talk about urgency in the abstract, but how do you actually create that within you? So you got to be able to. You gotta, for some people it might be that, if you want to solve cancer, for example, every year cancer is killing X number of people. The sooner you solve cancer, you will save off so much suffering, right, in the counterfactual world. So, cancer is solved sooner. In his case, again, he's able to, I haven't looked into the entire reasoning, but I would suppose, and so I would recommend to myself, like, I need to be able to construct that pressure and feel that pressure, incubate that pressure within me to know that time is short, I'm going to be here for a very short time. And the things I need to accomplish, I've got a whole long list, right? I've got this entire list of things I need to do while I'm on this planet, based on the ideals I have, the convictions I have, the goals I need to, objectives I need to attain. So, and he's got those things for himself. And he knows that he needs to do them they need to happen and happen fast. Because things build on top of each other, right? So it's not like everything's going to happen together. And so if you want to hit, for me, for example, if I hit, there's this thing, this project Elytrain. I wouldn't say anything else about it, but Project Elytrain is very, very important to me. And it's like the fifth major step. So there are 4 major things I need to accomplish before then. And I need to get to Elytrain ASAP. But to get to Elytrain ASAP, I need to do things 1, 2, 3, and 4 ASAP. Right. So to do number 4 ASAP, I need to do number 3 ASAP. Right. So again, and then you bring it all the way back to this very moment. So I need to do the very best. I need to be pushing hard right now if I want to get to that, long-term goal ASAP. That's the way you manufacture urgency. That's the way you, incubate pressure. you gotta feel the pressure every single moment. You gotta feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. The weight of, if the weight of the entire world feels too much or too abstract, then the weight of your own future world needs to be felt on your shoulders at a very minimum, right? Maybe if you want to keep it very small, very contained, the weight of your future family on your shoulders, your community on your shoulders, whatever, right? Like whatever that thing is for you. For me, one of the ways I kind of push myself is that alignment is a super important problem for me. Yeah, I think that I will have something meaningful to contribute to that problem. And this is not, this is not about me or my ego. I remove that from everything. But you got to be able to look at unique skills and talents and ideals and all of that, and the problems that you are uniquely able to make the biggest difference towards, right? And alignment is a huge problem. I want to be able to, even if I don't solve it or contribute to solving it, obviously that would be the best case scenario. I wouldn't say the best case scenario, but that I'd be happy, right? Like I want to solve alignment because that's like the biggest problem that we're facing as species right now. But I do believe that if we don't solve it in a given time period, we won't, well, the future won't exist for us as a species, right? Now, I also need a ton of resources to be able to solve that problem. And to be able to get those resources, I've got a plan to get there, right? But I need to solve step A, step B, step C, right? So that's how I kind of manufacture that pressure in me, incubate that pressure in me. Few other things: do not break the feedback loop of the feedback that your decisions are giving you, right? So you should feel the cost of your decisions in the manufacturing process, in the engineering process, in the design process. A lot of leaders, they become disconnected with decisions that they make, so the decisions kind of become abstracted away, and that breaks the feedback loop, which is so essential. Another principle that I absolutely love is doing things in parallel, right? So one of the reasons he's so effective is that he was not like, okay, you know what, let me first do SpaceX and then I'll kind of make it successful, I'll get it to the scale, and then I'll move to this electrification of the grid goal, and I'll move to this goal, AI goal. Right now he's able to, because he's able to, the way his brain operates is he's able to work on multiple massively ambitious projects in parallel by building systems. And again, these systems are going to be very contingent upon your own working style and the projects themselves. But the key thing is that you don't have to limit yourself to working. So focus, right? So this is the conventional wisdom in Silicon Valley, etc. is focus on a certain thing. You can't build something generational if you get caught up in multiple things, right? And I do obviously see the utility in that worldview. That's a worldview is just born out the best results, right? So it's just data backs up that worldview. But every now and then you get these people who are able to, who've got the superpower of being able to focus and also being able to compartmentalize and have parallel threads running in their brain. So the way their brains work is that if they've got multiple projects, they can focus on a given project in a given day. Like that's the only thing that matters. That's the only thing that is in the world. And the next day, they move on to the next thing, and they're able to forget about everything else about that previous project or company. They're able to focus on this particular project like nothing else matters. And then third project. And then on the fourth day, back to the first project, to the first company. And so there will be systems, right? And so systems is one part of it, but systems are abstractions. You still need to be wired a certain way where you can move on from the stresses and the worries and the concerns of a certain project, and you can completely shut them down in your brain, completely compartmentalize them whilst you're working on a separate project or company. And this is a special skill. This is so rare that it's not for everyone, right? if most people try to work even on two projects at a given time, they're going to fail miserably. Elon's wired differently, so he's able to make it work. I could talk a lot more. I mean, I have lots of notes that I could go through, um, where I've been just getting a ton of alpha from Elon's playbook, but it's already gone over time, and that should give you enough of a glimpse, right? And again, those are the core principles. Like if you just master those, put them again, you've got to recontextualize these principles for yourself in your own life. If you're able to do that, you'll become a 10x, 100x more effective operator than you currently are. Yeah, I'll leave you with that. Thanks for the time. Take care.